So hello, welcome. My name is Tyler Cooper. I'm the editor-in-chief at BroadbandNow. Joining me for the first in a series of video interviews is Drew Clark. Drew is the editor and publisher at Broadband Breakfast, as well as a telecom attorney with the Comlaw Group.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, awesome. So thank you again, Drew, for joining me on this first of hopefully many in a long series of interviews exploring the voices and expertise working to close the digital divide in the U.S. First off, could you just give everyone an overview and a background of your work prior to Broadband Breakfast?
Sure. Well, thank you, Tyler. And it's been great having you on several of our Broadband Breakfast live online events that we host every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. I consider myself a journalist, lawyer, and broadband leader. That's kind of a tagline I've used, Tyler. And so my career's really been about getting better broadband, better lives. And I actually founded Broadband Breakfast and its prior incarnation, which was called Broadband Census, in 2008, 12 years ago. And we've been focused on getting broadband data and then on news and events around broadband. So before that time, I was a journalist and I wrote about technology and telecommunications for National Journal, which an established Washington publication. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and that's where I've been most of my career. But I actually took a very interesting detour, Tyler, because Governor Pat Quinn of Illinois recruited me during the time of the Recovery Act, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, one of the first pieces of legislation put in when President Obama became president. The Recovery Act had a large sum of money devoted to getting broadband deployments out in the country. And it was a multifaceted effort. It included money for infrastructure, money for digital literacy training, money for mapping and planning. And the entity that I was recruited to run, called Broadband Illinois, or Partnership for Connected Illinois, we were a state broadband initiative entity. We collected data for the national broadband map, but we also had a facilitative role in helping the infrastructure development projects in the state of Illinois. So that got me very involved in the mechanics of building out networks, whether private or public sector. I take a very ecumenical approach. We need more broadband, no doubt about it, wherever it comes from. So that's kind of been one of the big, passions of the last 10 years in my work. Broadband Breakfast has continued along and it's grown, but that gives a kind of a quick snapshot for the role that an entity in the public-private sphere can play, like a state broadband initiative entity.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you very much. And I guess that sort of leads us pretty well into the journey with Broadband Breakfast itself. Could you,
Yeah.
I guess, what was the goal starting Broadband Breakfast, and then where has it taken you since?
So Broadband Breakfast and the predecessor, Broadband Census, started in an effort to really drive American acceleration for broadband. And as I started to research this issue as a journalist in 2003, 4, 5, I said, you know what, to get better broadband, we need better broadband data. That was kind of an initial prerequisite to getting that. The FCC actually had a lot of this data, but they were sitting on it. They wouldn't release it. They considered it proprietary. So with the predecessor organization, we actually sued the FCC under the Freedom of Information Act to get this data. It was not released. So we lost the battle, but I'd say we won the war in the sense that now everyone accepts the need for broadband mapping. The Recovery Act put in place the program that I referred to, the State Broadband Initiative Program that I ended up running in the state of Illinois. And while there's been ups and downs about the quality of broadband maps, it's quite something, Tyler, when late night comedians make fun of broadband maps in the FCC. And I've written about that for Broadband Communities and for Broadband Breakfast. And right now is actually an exciting time in this front again, because the FCC is actively considering a new initiative called the Digital Opportunity Data Collection that would bring address level refinements to broadband data. So, so kind of back to the question of the motivation is to get higher capacity broadband, and you need the data to be able to drive that higher capacity broadband universally.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic point. And I'd really like to talk briefly about what you just mentioned. So specifically, I believe, so you were involved obviously in the space when the FCC first began releasing 477 data. Could you briefly talk into the effort to get that data released a bit more? That's a fascinating period for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll send you a link, Tyler, that recounts a lot of this history, and you can share it with your readers and listeners. I mean, look, this issue can be seen from so many different perspectives, and I am sympathetic to some of the complaints that internet service providers make. This is a make-work thing the FCC makes us fill out, and it's very burdensome, the Form 477. But there are many good reasons to collect broadband data. And whether you collect all of it from the providers, or whether you collect some from the providers and you crowdsource it and check it, or whether you collect data from the consumers directly, that was originally what Broadband Census got started doing, is we asked people to take the broadband census and to collect data about speeds, about reliability, about prices. I call it the broadband spark: speeds, price, availability, reliability, and competition. You need to have all of these variables so that you can have an assessment of broadband. And moreover, it's really a roadmap for many different types of entities. Like the FCC has gone crazy now, or gone, like it's gotten excited about broadband mapping because it wants to direct broadband funds. I know we're going to be talking a little bit about the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, Tyler. Well, the RDOF program, which is it's going to be an auction that the FCC will do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this just now, in October, late October. But the reason for having broadband maps is so that it can more precisely allocate subsidies for areas that don't have good quality broadband. So all of these federal programs depend upon better broadband maps. The existing players need broadband data so that they can sell service to the appropriate people. New entrants who want to build higher capacity broadband need to be able to access mapping data and where the fiber lines go so that they can hook in and have interconnects and so forth. These are all essential elements. And we can't even forget the consumer protection element, which is to say, hey, if such and such a provider, internet service provider, promises to give me 250 megabits down and 20 megabits up, well, do I get it? Do I actually get it? Broadband providers have gotten better. They've gotten better with their speeds. They've gotten better with meeting their objectives. But there still may be a delta between what they promise and what they deliver. And so you want to have someone who's measuring that and able to compare it and hold their feet to the fire.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic point, that it's more than just about understanding availability.
Yeah.
A few months back, kind of speaking more to this, you published an article where you expressed the belief that the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund is going to play a crucial role in bringing broadband to the most rural parts of the nation. So just sort of zooming out and looking at this from the consumer standpoint, with phase one, as you said, beginning in a few short weeks, I think it's October 29th, if that's correct. How has that perspective changed at all, just in a general sense? And what do you expect this to mean for consumers in the coming years?
Sure. So the FCC has a major sum of money every year called the Universal Service Fund, and it's gone through many iterations and many names. But basically, this is a good chunk of money, 10 billion more or less, every year that it gets allocated, comes in and goes out. So there are different mechanisms for bringing the money in, and there are different mechanisms for taking it out. And the RDOF, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, is the latest gloss. It's a name and a program that the current FCC chairman, Ajit Pai, has put in place. And it builds on a decade-long process that was driven, in fact, by the National Broadband Plan of 10 years ago. The National Broadband Plan said, you know what, we got to get away from the old way of shoveling money out willy-nilly to rural areas, and we want to get towards a more economic, cost-benefit way of doing this. And that indeed carried the day. The Connect America Fund Round 2 auction was one of the first to do this. The RDOF Round 1 auction, which starts on October 29th, is going to do this even more. It's going to allocate a significant chunk of money, $16 billion will be allocated, up to $16 billion in this round of the RDOF. And this is not necessarily an obvious concept. So let me take a minute to explain what a reverse auction is, okay? Because what the heck is a reverse auction? People are going, well, okay, let's start with an auction. What's an auction? An auction when a single person wants to get a high price for a good, and they bring a bunch of potential buyers into a room, and they say, oh, hey, you take $5, take $10, take $20, bidder one, the fast talking thing that we think of at auctions. So basically a single seller is trying to get multiple potential buyers to bid up the price to the highest amount. Okay, so that's an auction, right? That's what an auction is. One seller, many buyers. Okay, a reverse auction, just flip that. You have a single buyer, the federal government. They're going to buy broadband service, and multiple sellers. So instead of trying to bid the price, and the auctioneer in the traditional auction wants to get people to bid the price up. In a reverse auction, the auctioneer, the federal government, the Federal Communications Commission, is trying to bid the price down. And so it wants to pay the lowest amount that it can for getting the service, the broadband service. And that's where you have all of these different bidders, sellers, coming forth. And so the reverse auction process is the federal government says, I've got $16 billion and that's it. I won't go a penny above it. And then they're basically looking to get the best deal, which includes the best combination of speeds and latency. They give preference for faster speeds, gigabit level speeds, and low latency. Those will definitely get preference in the auction process. And of course, how much they're going to ask for, right, or bid, right? And so the winner will get a sum of money, and it will be a straight line, 12 payments a year, one a month for 10 years, 120 payments. They're going to get that amount for 10 years. So because that's such a kind of a nice prize for many of these broadband providers, it has attracted a lot of interest from non-traditional players in the broadband world. And like I said, I mean, this will be 10 times bigger than the CAF, the Connect America Fund auction, in terms of the amount of money being awarded. So, I mean, again, expect it to be a really dynamic reverse auction that starts in a matter of weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very interested to see updates on it. So I guess because you've been involved for so many years, I'd love to get your sort of even wider perspective on this. So over the past decade, would you say that the FCC's strategies and approach to deploying broadband in general has changed substantially? And if so, how, in your opinion?
Well, the FCC is a complicated animal that is driven by multiple agendas and constituencies. It is technically an independent agency, but really responds to the political forces of, who's the president, and also who's in Congress, and is saying, go ahead and do this or don't do this. I've just identified one trend that I think is positive and has carried forward over the course of multiple administrations and multiple years, and that's the move towards an economic cost-benefit approach to broadband auction. So that's very positive. That's a positive development. Mm-hmm. There are other things that kind of continue generally positively, and that is to say, you see efforts at the FCC to allocate spectrum and to free up spectrum from, let's just call them old and dated uses, to more efficient and appropriate uses so that more people can use more wireless frequencies for getting broadband out there. There are other issues that are constant battles between the two parties. Net neutrality is one of them. We can talk more if you want to, but there are other ones that I'm passionate about too that don't necessarily get the same attention. But I think we have a real issue in this country with states basically restricting access. And I know, Tyler, you've written about this. I mean, BroadbandNow has written quite a bit about this, highlighting those states that have restrictions on broadband. And it's not good, right? It's not good that a special interest can control lobbyists and lobbying and state activity, and as well as federal activity too. But again, you want to at least mix it up, right? So that you have some forces advocating for a more universal approach to broadband, more competition among different alternatives than you would have otherwise. So those are some of the issues. Some that are united with people who are for. That is to say, some united. Everyone at the FCC pushes for them on USF and on Spectrum, and others that are kind of constantly partisan battles over net neutrality and over municipal broadband access.
Absolutely. That's great. I appreciate the insight. So, Drew, I guess I really just have one more main question. I spend a lot of my days, especially lately, trying to explain digital divide in the wider context to general media, which is something you've done for years at Broadband Breakfast. What do you think, from your perspective, is the biggest public misunderstanding about broadband access in the U.S.?
No, thanks for asking. And this will lead me to another issue that I would like to mention that kind of ties into policy.
Please.
Here's what I think is the biggest misconception. It is that all broadband is created equal, okay? And it's not, right? Let's just think about what that term means. Now, I like the term broadband. You obviously do as well. BroadbandNow, we're Broadband Breakfast. Mm-hmm. Broadband Breakfast believes that you need to get higher capacity broadband in more and more places, right? So our tagline is better broadband, better lives. And so what is better broadband? Well, it's better than what we have now, which is 25.3. That is to say 25 megabits per second down, 3 megabits per second up. That's the current federal definition of broadband. It used to be lower, it went up, but It's been almost 10 years since, maybe 8 years, I can't remember right off the top of my head, since it's been raised. And so we need to go up. We need to go up to 100 at least, okay? And why 100? Because 100 up and 100 down allows you to have symmetrical connections. Unless you have higher capacity upload speeds, you are inherently limited in what you can do with broadband. Now, again, I'm not saying this everywhere, and I understand certain circumstances you can't always get that, but let's kind of start to focus on, let's call it, 10 to the power of 4 broadband, right? Because, if you multiply the broadband down by the broadband up and you get 100 times 100, you'll have 10,000, that's 10 to the 4th, right? We should have a definition of broadband that says we need broadband where you have higher uploads as well as higher downloads. Because, if you can go up to 50, even a gigabit down, but if your upstream is limited, then you're not going to be able to do in an unbuffered way what we're doing now, video conferencing. I mean, kids, because of the coronavirus, are working from home. I have 5 multi-stream connections every day at my house, and you need that upstream connections if you're gonna have a quality connection. And this is not even accounting for the applications that are going to come online, right? The telepresence, kinds of things where you are able to do more that you are not able to do with just your slower, more 2010 type of connection. So kind of that's a misconception. Now, I haven't even gotten into the difference between technologies, right? And I don't want to say one technology is good and another is bad. There are obviously technologies that are building blocks to everything. Fiber, for example, is a building block. I mean, even if you're doing wireless deployments, you're going to have fiber deep into your network, all the way to towers, all the way to small cells. And sometimes you even put, a wireless hop because you can't get the rights of way to build underground. And so, you can have a fiber network that has wireless in there too. I'm not saying, it has to be fiber 100%, but you are going to want to have as much fiber as possible in your network design. So those are kind of two aspects, right? The upstream aspect and the technology, and there's also reliability too, right? I mean, how many times do you have to reboot your router? I had to do that a lot when I had a cable modem technology. I have fiber, symmetrical fiber, gigabit fiber now, and I don't have to reboot my router every couple of days. So again, there's some differences there, and all broadband is not created equal, but we need to get to a world where we understand that. And that kind of leads me to the point I wanted to go back to, if I may, which is I think it's highly likely that we're going to see infrastructure spending, right? Whenever there is going to be a major infrastructure spending, there will be broadband as part of that, okay? And so we need to be thinking about ways to invest in open access fiber, okay? And what do I mean by that? I mean to say the government, if it is going to invest, and I'm not, trying to make a point it should or shouldn't, but if it is going to, it should make sure that the investment it makes in networks is the best technology that can be used by others, fiber, and also technology that can be open so that other providers and competitors can enter into those networks and make use of them. And I'm a big believer that we are really just on the cusp of some significant changes and significant opportunities in the infrastructure in the United States. We actually have an annual conference, Tyler, called at Broadband Breakfast. It's called Digital Infrastructure Investment, and we focus on this. We focus on what new types of infrastructure are coming online and how will they be financed. And that's what gets me up every day, is to be able to say, hey, how can we get more cities doing more things to get more broadband networks out there? And how can different players take advantage of different opportunities, different programs? It's a big melange, right? There's so many players in the broadband space, from the federal to the state to the private to the public. So many types of players, because you've got all these tech companies that are vital in the sense that we use their products, right? Zoom, for example, we're recording this on a Zoom platform. Zoom was kind of like a nothing, a year ago. I mean, I'm being exaggerating, of course. They were obviously a very, very well-known company, but they have just taken off like that because of the coronavirus, because they were an easy-to-use technology that enables, enables communication. And that's the kind of thing we're going to see countless more examples of if we continue to go on upward trajectory, continue to have better broadband and better lives.
Absolutely. That was very succinct. I answered multiple questions at once. I appreciate it. That's great.
Well, my pleasure. I mean, I think that, you're doing something vital, Tyler, at BroadbandNow, and really highlighting options that people have, because that's really crucial. And, as I said at the top of the hour, we need to have better broadband data. That's a central part. And once people kind of start to know, okay, like, who is my provider? Who are my options? They can start to say, well, do I want to explore other options? What do I need to do to bring broadband to me? Because there are ways you can own your own broadband, own your own fiber. There are companies that will help communities to build out fiber where they can start to have that kind of connectivity that they don't have right now.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Drew, thank you again for doing this. I appreciate it. It's short and sweet, but I appreciate you taking the time. You have a show as well, Broadband Breakfast Live. Where can viewers watch that?
Yeah, absolutely. Broadband Breakfast Live online. Go to broadbandbreakfast.com. sign up for our email alerts, and you'll get notices of all of our events. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time, we host a program. Right now, we've actually just launched a new series called A No-Nonsense Guide to 5G. I mean, 5G, the most overused buzzword of 2019 and 2020. And we're going to basically deconstruct it, say, well, what's real and what's hype? And we're going to talk about the spectrum. We're going to talk about the infrastructure. We're going to talk about the supply chain. Talk about the enterprise. All these issues will be discussed at this event. And so just go to broadbandbreakfast.com. And you can also, if you want a shortcut, broadbandbreakfast.com/BBLO for Broadband Breakfast Live Online. That will take you to our latest page of events, and you can see what's happening and put it on your calendar. Sign up for our YouTube channel so you'll be get the alerts when the events happen. And we're in this for the long haul. We're going to keep doing this program because it brings people together. We started when the coronavirus hit, right? And people needed a place to talk through some issues, and we've continued and want to keep the discussion going. So I'm sure we'll have you and your colleagues on some more, Tyler. But for our viewers, go to broadbandbreakfast.com to learn more about it.
Looking forward to joining again. Yeah, and thank you again, Drew. I appreciate it.
All right, take care, Tyler.